Unerwartet singt eine schöne Frauenstimme.
Young and lovely. Yeah, and a girl from and when she was they all say
Okay.
Good evening, folks. You're listening to Fold by Fold podcast, and well, first of all, sorry for the long pause. I had some stuff to take care of, but today I have the great honor to talk to Dr. Sivan Cohen Elias, doctor of everything, I guess. Interdisciplinary artist, composer, Harvard guest lecturer. How you doing tonight, Sivan? Or today, rather, in America.
Right. Hi. I'm doing well. I'm happy to have this conversation with you and ready to talk about interesting stuff.
Oh, and we have lots of interesting stuff to talk about today. For those of you who haven't seen Sivan's stuff so far, I absolutely urge you to pause the video right now and check out her website, because you're not gonna believe this. This this lady has worked in so many idioms and fused so many things and transgressed so many borders. It's just really quite the honor to have you on here, Sivan.
Thank you.
Let's just start with the generic stuff that I ask everybody, but it's always a very fascinating question, always yields interesting answers. What is your origin story? What was your relationship with the arts and with music growing up? And how did you become who you are right now?
Right. Thank you for this question. It's rare to get that question, actually. So
Really?
It's fun to go back to the very, very beginning. So I grew up in Israel, and more precisely in Jerusalem. And I grew up actually in a neighborhood that now is very, very occupied, but at the time it was basically just fields. and we lived in a house that was very separated from the neighbors. So every neighbor was quite a nice few meters away. And it gave a lot of, activity with nature. And I would just step out of my house and just go to the fields and explore what is there, find another pond and another tree. And it was really, really fun, actually, to live in this environment. But today's very central neighborhood in Jerusalem, actually, it's called Malcha. And I guess it took time to people to discover that place and to decide that it's a good place to live. Well, then I was drawn to sound from a very, very early stage. My mom is a visual artist and a writer, and my father is an electrician. So I always say the electricity came from him, the creativity came from her, and from, let's say at age 5, although I started before that, at age 4 already, I would kind of take all of the, like many kids do, take many tools from the kitchen and try to bang on them and create your own drum set. But also, I remember very clearly a moment in my life that kind of always comes back to me. My parents took me to some random house for me. I don't know who it was.
Yeah.
But there was a piano there. And I was really, really into playing that piano. I was 5. And I started to improvise my way on the keys. And then I found this, I guess it was either a minor second or major second, but maybe both. And I just explored that sound. It really fascinated me.
Wow.
And I really loved it because it reminded me the honks in the road. And I started to play with it as if it's the honks in the road. And like I created a whole piece out of it for hours, I think, until the people that we came to said they have a headache and that they needed me to stop. But I guess
they weren't really hip to the avant-garde yet, were they?
Yeah, not yet. Yeah, and then I kind of told my parents I want to play the piano. I want to play the piano, and I kind of like bugged them until they got me a piano. And then I started to learn the piano. I also sang a lot, and I went to the school choir, and also recorders, orchestra thing or ensemble, let's say. And and it all started to kind of develop in that direction. And at the same time, I was really into many different arts. I drew next to my mom all my childhood. She would use a particular technique, so then I would want to also use that technique. And, so I kind of grew through this visual art all the time. And I really love drawing until today. And sculpting and dancing. I actually really, really love dancing and create my own choreography. And so I really took a lot of classes all my childhood. And this kind of brought me to this realization that music is the most important part for me, but it's kind of a link for creating something that is beyond music for me. And that it kind of gives also my passion to choreography and to visuals and my imaginary world to kind of represent not only through sound, but also sometimes through other mediums.
Wow. Yeah, that's actually really fascinating, because it just shows that even in your childhood, like the visual arts and sculpting and dancing, choreography and music, it was already intertwined, right? This was not something you cultivated later on. Just
Yeah, apparently. I mean, I think I learned them separately, and I didn't think to connect them at first. I didn't know how. Or I didn't even think about that. But later on, when I applied to schools, it was kind of like a crossroad that I had, or like a fork in the road that I had to choose, because then I was a little bit more aware of the idea of multidisciplinary or interdisciplinary art. And I applied to an intermediate school that really focuses on creating those kind of art. And at the same time, I applied to the Academy of Music and to do my my first degree. And I was accepted for both. And I really had a really hard time deciding
Can imagine.
which way to go. And even through the application process, the intermedia school kind of showed me that I have even things in theater that I could explore further, and but at the same time, they didn't have a strong emphasis on sound, on music, and that was kind of missing for me.
Yeah.
And then this kind of gave me the idea that, okay, I will first focus on music and learn everything, make it like real depth, into the depths of it, so I know it for sure.
Yeah.
and then I can bring in these other fields and know how to connect between them in the way that works for me. So that's what I did.
Wow, very systematic. And yeah, I just remember you wrote in your writings. Maybe we're getting a little bit ahead of ourselves since we haven't really talked about your projects so far. But you mentioned that when you compose, it's not like you're composing music and then adding layers, but everything kind of comes together at the same time, right? It's already entangled when you write. Yeah.
Exactly. It's entangled through the process, actually, because the process is that, I have a few different corners in my room, let's say. It's not really corner, but, you can call it this way. And in each section like that is a different thing. So I have a table that is with all kinds of objects and like cheap instruments that I put around, and I think about how to connect different materials, like physically, to find interesting sounds for me. That let's say that a violin suddenly will sound like accordion, like or like something from everyday life object, and it will sound like it. So I kind of find all those constructions to create those sounds. That's one section. The other section is just like a table with papers, and this is where I make like drafts and eventually also the score itself. The other section is my computer and speakers and the microphone and other things that I experiment the electronic media. And then there is also the camera that comes in and out. And when I start to really develop the idea in the performative aspect, then I start to videotape myself, and then I will watch it and check what parts work for me and how they incorporate to some sort of a story. And this is how the storyline comes in. Also, that a gesture connected with particular sound creates some sort of an association from real life, and then it's all connected to a topic that I decided in advance, and then it always looks at the topic from many different angles. So basically, it's pretty chaotic, the whole process. It's like every day I find myself going from this table to that table to that table to this, and then I take things from boxes and realize, this can actually maybe work with that, and then it starts to kind of develop a chaos in the room. And all the sections kind of combine together, and then I kind of reset the whole thing, start over. until everything comes together. So yeah, that's how it's entangled. Yeah.
That's just wonderful. Honestly, I find that very, very charming and sympathetic because I'm very chaotic myself, especially when working on something. It just really resonates. Um, now the first time we've met in quotation marks was at
Yeah.
this embodiment seminar by the
Mhm.
University of Antwerp, where you portrayed your piece "How to Make a Monster." And
Mhm.
you made this wonderful mini documentary that I also
Mhm.
urge to, for the listeners to check out. It's beautifully made, and you can really kind of see this chaotic associative
Mhm.
process going on there. You're playing around with the threads and the metal bowls and stuff like that. Uh, yeah, it's honestly it's kind of magical, looking at the genesis of the piece and then looking at the finished piece. And whenever I've showed how to make a monster to friends of mine, they they were always really, really impressed, and like everybody liked it, even though these
Oh,
people have
good to
never,
know.
like most people I showed it to have never, really looked into this kind of
Mhm.
composition. I mean, outside of you, there's hardly anyone doing this. But, uh, yeah, like everybody was like found a way to connect with it, which is just
Mm.
I find that very magical. Would you like to tell us a little bit about the piece?
Sure. So How to Make a Monster is a piece I wrote in 2016, 17.
Hmm.
And it started from just looking at metal balls and the potential of the sound that they make, and then the potential of their visual aspect,
Hmm.
that I step by step brought in different types of toys that created that connection with monsters.
Hmm.
And it was also related to the fact that there was a very strong political tension in that time in the US where I live.
Yeah.
And at the time, I was also applying for a green card, which
Oh no. Bad
which,
time to
by
be
the
applying
way,
for a green card, yeah.
I know, but fortunately, in the end, I can tell you a spoiler to this story that I got the green card in the end. But like it was a really interesting time to feel and think about the idea of monstrous
Mhm.
and what is a monster and how different angles see different monsters
Mhm.
in different entities.
Yeah.
And although there are a few things that we can all probably agree that is more on that side of the world,
Mhm.
you know, but if we talk about details and specificities, uh, every person has different angle and different opinions.
Mhm.
And this kind of created many different angles to the piece to show the vulnerability of someone that become, let's say, evil
Yeah.
at, at, at later on in their life, but maybe they are forced to be evil or to
Yeah.
be perceived as evil because they were forced to live in a specific condition that caused them to, to
Yeah.
do something that is perceived as evil. But it's maybe sometimes desperation, maybe it's sometimes something else that tried all kinds of different things, and in the end they somehow forced to become like that. And but for me it's also interesting to see how media merges different realities of our life. So it's like, on the one hand, we have the news, which is already something that is so complex these days, because there is not one channel that shows you the facts of what is actually happening. And there are many different perspectives that show the news in a different way, with slight manipulations. And those manipulations are what I observe to see, no matter which media does it, every media does it. And for me, it's kind of interesting to kind of replicate the idea of the manipulation on the viewer. And then we have other things on media. We have advertisement, we have social media, we have tons of opinions of people. We have all these funny videos on YouTube that show you how to make things.
Yeah, I see.
So all of that is kind of combined, almost like saying, looking at monster in the middle, and then many different angles of different types of monsters that we meet on the way. And of course, we meet also the monster inside ourselves. And this kind of also is represented throughout the entire arch of the piece, that basically creates an outline that makes a little creature grow and become somewhat monstrous, but we see how there is some sort of a very complex relationship with the creator, with the performer.
It's like what you wrote about puppeteering, where at some point, there's this kind of ironic, perverse relationship where, the puppet plays the puppeteer just as much as the puppeteer, steers the puppet.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. And this tension and humor that kind of intertwine there, this is what I'm all the time trying to kind of achieve in this piece.
And it's so humorous. Like, whenever I've showed it to people, at the very last point, when the googly eyes appears, that's where everybody loses it,
Yes.
It's wonderful. And of course, at this online seminar, the great Winnie Huang gave just an absolutely amazing performance of it. And like the line between the creation and the creator and monsterhood just became super blurry, and it's just so charming and humorous. And please, everybody listening right now, check this piece out. It's just it's wonderful.
Yes, really, I was about to mention her, by the way. Winnie Huang, she did an incredible job, and we worked on it online during the pandemic. And we wanted to meet and to workshop it together, but in the end it didn't come to that, and we decided to alternatively work on it on Zoom and in kind of like specific dates along a very long time, like I think over 2 months, that we kind of met for like 2-3 hours, discussed different things, and then back again to do our own things. And then after a few weeks, we would meet again, and she would send me recordings of her doing the thing, and then we would discuss a bit more to kind of make things more refined and more to understand better my intentions, but also sometimes she would bring her own interpretation, which is beautiful. And I even inserted one or two gestures to the piece according to her. And yeah, she did an incredible job.
Really, yeah.
Yeah.
Just absolutely crazy. And I remember when I was at the seminar, I had never really seen anything like this. Like the closest thing to this kind of stuff was like Mauricio Cargill that I knew. But this is like a completely different beast, no pun intended, of course. But, yeah, this just really honestly blew my mind. It just made me want to explore like all the stuff you do. Another thing you do is these sound sculptures. Like, is there, when you're working on a sculpture, how does this process compare to your process of composing?
It's very similar in a way, because I really try to create a connection between different materials that normally we don't have in a musical instrument. So, for example, I will connect metal with wood, with plastic, with water, with strings, but more like fishing line normally.
Oh,
but
yeah, these fishing lines, they appear like throughout your work.
I know, yes. Yeah, and actually, when I discover a material that works in a specific way and acoustically, I immediately want to see how it's connected to other things and what does it do with other things. So, for example, when I discovered styrofoam, and this is something that, of course, is being used for a long time, styrofoam, and people normally bow on styrofoam to create these squeaks that we like or
there
not.
would be, rubbing of multiple styrofoam plates.
Yeah, exactly. And then it makes like specific pitch even it can do. At the same time, I discovered these styrofoam balls that normally are used for decorations in Christmas, and I threaded through the ball the fishing line or other strings, and then I realized that this is actually a really good source of amplification.
Like it amplifies the plucking of the string, or
yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, it amplifies any material that goes through it.
Crazy.
It is amazing, and for me, it's always this fascination to find acoustical matters, or let's say it like that, a physical material that creates something that is almost electronic sound. So this amplification gave me a lot of ideas. So I used it also in my sound sculpting, sound sculptures. Let's say there was a harp that I made that is kind of tilted and hanged from the ceiling, and it has just different types of strings along both ways. And through the strings, I threaded different balls, different other items, slinkies, which also come back in my pieces now and then, and the styrofoam ball. And then you can pluck the strings of this harp and hear something that can sound a little bit electronic.
This is speaking of making a sound that is somewhat electronic-like. I'm sorry, the name of the piece escaped me right now, but you wrote a piece for string quartet, I believe.
Yes, I knew
Yeah.
I knew you. Yeah. Yeah, I knew you would mention that because it is actually exactly that. It's called Encrypt. And
Yeah,
this is
exactly. Yeah.
it's basically it's a string quartet, but it's also for me a material that I kind of created for my opera .onion.
Exactly. I realized it kind of reappears.
Yes, exactly. So actually, we can kind of move to talk about the opera in a
please.
second, but
Yeah.
but I can actually already talk about it from talking about Encrypt, that I created a few different pieces that are standalone pieces, but I knew already at the time of composing that it's going to be part or layer, even though I don't like to say layers, but in this piece specifically, it is a layer of the opera. So Encrypt is related to .onion because the .onion is kind of situated in a world that is representing the deep web, which is, the unregulated area of the internet. And basically, you are anonymous there. And when I researched about it and see how it works,
Hope
the
you
mechanism.
didn't get the FBI knocking on your door.
No, I actually didn't serve that's the whole point of the opera, actually, is that everything is basically kind of revealed these days, even when you don't really go there, because what I found is a YouTube channel, and that's in the real world, that basically the presenter of that YouTube channel surfers the deep web.
I just saw a video the other day where a guy ordered a hitman on himself, which is just crazy, Like,
really?
yeah,
Wow.
the stuff people do on YouTube, it's just
I
insane.
know, it's crazy. It's crazy. Exactly. So there is so much source to just like get inspiration from. So that guy, he actually has a series, and he every time surfaces different places on the deep web and tells you what he sees, and he shows what he can show, and then he blares out what he can't show on YouTube. But he kind of talks about it and he describes it and stuff. So that kind of really what the opera is trying to show. And Encrypt is the encryption that the code of the Tor surface platform works.
The whole onion system,
Yeah, the whole onion system, that basically you have many layers of encryption, and when you send a message on the deep web, it goes through many different relay computers around the world, and every computer it moves through, one layer of the encryption is stripped. So until it gets to where it should go, and the person that is supposed to receive the message then see it completely decrypted. So Encrypt is trying to kind of creating that kind of encryption code. And I used a phishing line again to wrap a bow, but actually the wooden part of the bow, and create some sort of a guero with it. And the idea was that when you bow half wood and half hair on the strings and create specific shapes, it creates some sort of it sounds like some sort of harmony or melody or a song that underneath, and but it's very distracted, very distorted because of all the plaques that appear from the fishing line. And also the musicians are instructed to follow the line of the score. The score has every time a shape that they need to follow, and imagine that the bow is a pencil, and there is a pencil in the middle of the bow that needs to create that shape every time. So they basically follow those shapes that are mainly 8 shape lines, and with different places of where to mute the strings and where to maybe unmute the strings or finger. And when it's performed on stage and you listen to it, it's kind of making a whole illusion-like situation, because you see the musicians bowing and you don't know that they have this fishing line, and suddenly you hear a lot of plaques. And and you kind of think, how does it happen that they are bowing and there are plaques? I'm sure there is electronics that
it's like acoustic granular synthesis or something.
Exactly. And that's the whole point of creating that illusion and
alienation, right? Like you've written about, alienation and distortions a little bit, and that's just it runs like a red thread through like all your work that I've been able to find online. There's always this kind of distortion or alienation effect, usually by the means of electronics, but sometimes without.
Yes, right, like a degrading or
like disintegration. And with Dot Onion, it's also entangled once again, the movement on stage and the video projections, and it follows its own little dreamlike logic. And you've talked about it being kind of like a trailer, right? Like a movie trailer.
Yes. The structure is like a movie trailer that doesn't really show the entire story, that has kind of like holes in the middle that we don't know what happened in between those scenes. But it gives enough information that will attract our attention, and we will want to see the entire movie.
Sadly, we didn't get to watch the whole opera, did we?
Oh,
that's so sad.
I'm still waiting to actually find the right production place that we will actually work together to create the entire movie opera. I did in the end create another opera that is not Dot Onion, but even Adin, which how to make a monster.
Exactly, I saw that.
Also part of it.
That's so cool. Like personally, I'm a huge fan of Stockhausen. And that's something he constantly did, where he would write pieces
Right.
and then insert them into larger works. And
Yes.
it takes real conceptual virtuosity to pull that off, I think, right? So it's not that easy to integrate
Yeah.
something which is already closed in itself, which is already in closed
Right.
form into another bigger, like a Matryoshka doll from Russia,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. But for me, it's the most fascinating part because it's like it's basically like creating a soundscape. Because when you listen to the soundscape and you focus on specific sound sources, you will recognize a particular pattern that happens because of some bug. And then another pattern that happens because of the traffic, and another because of humans, and and all of those sources create the environment and create some sort of what is happening sonically in the environment within this amount of time that I'm now maybe listening to this environment.
Yeah.
And in this way, that's kind of my way to integrate different materials. I really try to always keep them in the pacing and the way that they were composed originally, because what they did there was the right,
Yeah.
sequence. And maybe I will give more space in between different lines, but other than that, I'm more or less very faithful to the original order of things.
Yeah, and even in such an atemporal context as Dot Onion, where things are intercut and there's not really any linearity, but there's still some kind of drive. There's still some kind of forward movement, right?
Yes, definitely. Because each of the layers that I created creates its own timeline, and its own kind of tension and release, let's say. So we have the main protagonist that is the singer, tenor, and he's like the presenter on YouTube that surfaces the deep web and tells us how to be careful there, and and all that. And in the meanwhile, we already see him a little bit stuttered and lagging and a little bit glitchy, and we see
that's foreshadowing.
yeah. So we see it and hear it.
Yeah.
It's kind of incorporated to the score as well. And so, for example, he will say something and then suddenly it will kind of keep for a long time to be sang, even though he doesn't sing anymore, but we kind of hear it in this way, like a freeze. And then it kind of comes back to normal, So because of that, this happens because there is a hacker that is trying to hack to his computer and actually to hack to his brain through the speakers. And
this hacker actually related to the piece Hack for one player and two guitars?
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
There we go.
Hack is another layer. Hack is another layer of Dot Onion. Yeah. So we have Encrypt, we have Hack. What else do we have as another layer that becomes a piece?
The one with the violin and the styrofoam ball, right?
Right. Yeah. Yeah. This is kind of like, I don't really I didn't put it as a piece by itself, but it is actually something that I created as a situation scene. So that's another layer of seeing the kind of the websites that you might visit on the deep web. So one of them is called Red Room, where people get tortured, and the people that watch it, they pay money for the torturers to keep going, you know. So this scene is represented with the soprano singer that holds a violin on her lap, and then she has a surprise, another fishing line. But in a different way. It's kind of looped and threaded through the violin.
I will link to this demonstration video in the video description, just so people can look at it. It's kind of difficult to explain, but there's it's the violin is basically it's threaded through the fishing line between one of the performer's hands, and then there's a second performer also navigating objects. Difficult to explain, but just check it out. The link is in the description. Wow.
Yes, the other performer is like the torturer, basically.
I see.
Yeah.
Wow. This is just kind of wild, you know. Like I first saw your work and I was like, oh, Sivan, she's the googly eye composer, but she's also the Red Room torture music composer, you know. That's just...
Yeah, you know what I really am fascinated about is creating those connections between real information that I get, that I learn about, that happens in the world, and then designing a whole environment that seems as if it's all surreal. It's all it's like unbelievable, really. And this is some sort of an absurd that we are living in right now, that is all
totally.
In between reality and virtual and imaginary and fantasy and futuristic kind of concepts that we can already imagine. Different scenarios that will happen in the future because of technology and where it's going, and all of that is kind of discussed through my pieces.
Damn. And it really does relate somehow to our daily lives on a very, like we live that disconnect every single day. I think this is why your music really resonates, even for people, who might not have learned how to program Max MSP patches. By the way, if you don't mind, to get a little bit surface level into the nerdy stuff, because I know lots of listeners are interested in that. When you work in Max MSP, what are the typical permutations that you would use on an audio signal?
Yeah. So I have a few favorites, and then I all the time try to expand more and to learn how to...
The eternal struggle of audio coding.
Yeah, of course. But the main thing that I am very fascinated about is what at least I kind of call it resynthesis, which is using the microphone as a sensor of just sensing the energy of a gesture, and that goes through the max patch, and whatever I program, it will blend the dry signal of the sound that comes from whatever you do together with something that I caused it to to synthesize as at the same time. So even in How to Make a Monster, you can hear that when she plucks all those balls, you hear sounds of strings.
Yeah,
And,
right.
and that's the synthesis that I
Wow.
used. So that is from a method called Car plus Strong.
Ah, yeah, of course. Yeah, classical physical modeling algorithm.
Exactly.
Yeah, I think lots of
Yeah.
listeners will already know what we're talking about because we got the nerds in this house.
Yeah, I love that. And I keep trying to find other physical modeling sounds
Oh, have you tried out
that,
Irkam Modalis?
oh no.
Oh, that's
Oh,
crazy.
good.
I
I'm
gotta
trying to
link
write
you
it
up to that. I'm an OrCam
down.
member,
Yes.
so in case you aren't, I can just send you a zip file. But it's basically a max environment for any kinds of physical modeling. And I've seen people create like hyper realistic reed instruments with it and stuff like that. It's absolutely amazing. And the only thing that I've been able to do, honestly, was creating large metal objects like bells, because that's fairly easy, right? You need an
Yes.
exciter and then you need the 3D object. But it's the programming environment Modalis, developed by OrCam in France. It's just insanely powerful. Yeah, I definitely gotta hit you up with that stuff.
Yeah.
I can't imagine what you'll be able to come up with that.
Yeah.
By the way, this resynthesis you've talked about, is this the same way you kind of created the cross modulations in holes and tunnels?
Holes and tunnels.
Sorry if
Actually,
I'm really digging back into the past.
no. It's good. Maybe you mean still life with squares?
Maybe I was
Because holes
referring
and
to the
tunnels
to the
actually doesn't have electronics in it.
I was talking about the audio example. You've got a wave of qualities.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. This
You
is
know, the
also
kind
not
of cross synthesis between railroad sounds and then ducks quacking and yeah.
yes, exactly. So that is, yes, exactly. This is my fascination in like sound phenomena that are complex sounds, complex timbre and texture that will have a very specific behavior that you can then find in many different sources in different way. So for example, that railroad that has that kind of a crack on the road and makes all of the cars make kind of like a quacking sound when you cross the bridge.
Yeah.
And this, in my ear, sounds very similar to a whole farm of like ducks that I just happened to visit, and that really quack in this way, in the same kind of pattern, the same kind of quality. So it's so beautiful for me to think about how one sound and its own behavior links with a completely different sound that has very similar behavior internally. But of course, it has its own way that can then be linked with a completely different sound also. And this is how you create this kind of ever-changing pattern that transforms from one to another to another to another, but it has some seed that links all of them underneath.
Wow. And like for the listeners at home, let this be like a testament of Sivan's creativity, because usually when composers try to find this connecting seed or this connecting thread, they would do like spectral analysis and stuff like that. But Sivan is just listening to a railroad and be like, "Oh, this sounds like ducks," It's just insanely creative. Like, honestly, it's so impressive. Yeah,
Yeah.
really wonderful, honestly. Oh, I'm so sorry, but we're already nearing the end. And there's one more
Yeah.
piece I really want to talk about.
Mhm.
And that's Alucard. That's the
Mm.
leeches,
Yeah.
Tell us something about that. That must be like your most minimalist piece to date, I believe.
Interesting to put it this way. Yeah, I mean, I think Alukot for me is kind of a point in my life that I decided to integrate the different interests that I have,
Mhm.
and to find a new way of performance that makes the hands not only performing sound, but to become specific, or not specific, but to become entities, to become like a body by itself that is like, if you will, dancers. So I created this surface that is a little bit tilted, and the performer, which is me to date.
Yeah. I'm putting images on the screen for the listeners at home. Yeah, it's very visually striking, that performance.
Thank you. And the surface is tilted so the audience in real time can observe what is happening on the surface and with the hands. And the hands have some sort of relationship where one is always gets stuck on specific gesture, and the other is trying to take it out of that. And
Oh,
and
wow.
then when it succeeds eventually to take it out, somehow the other hand starts to actually do the same gesture that it tried to take it out, but in a
Oh,
different way. And
yeah.
then all the time it again, this kind of transformation of the same thing, but all the time different.
Huh. Um, and there's
And this
an
is actually the
imaginary
beginning
ball.
of the
Sorry.
yeah, true. There is an imaginary ball that also started another aspect in my work that I keep playing with that in pieces, telling the musicians to imagine a specific shape or something or an object that they kind of pretend they have in their space, so they have to go around it or they play with it in a way that will react to the real items that around them in a specific behavior and will create specific rhythms. So that's that, and also the hands and the whole situation is basically the beginning of me creating a semi puppetry environment.
Okay. Here, the puppetry reappears. We've gone full circle from how to make
Yes,
a monster to
exactly.
Alucard. Yeah, there we go. It's all
Which is actually
intertwined,
the
people.
opposite.
Yeah.
Yeah, it is from Alucard to how to make a monster, basically,
Right.
in terms of
Yeah.
chronologically
Yeah,
speaking.
chronologically speaking, yeah, totally. Um,
Yeah.
damn, yeah, damn, Sivan, this has been extremely inspiring and a very, very interesting talk, and obviously a huge
Yeah.
honor for me to just be able to talk with you like that. And I really hope the listeners had just as much fun. To
Me too.
conclude, do you have any upcoming projects which you want to plug or anything?
Oh, yeah, sure. I'm working on a piece for Ensemble Sound Initiative,
Mhm.
and this is going to be an electroacoustic intermedia, with the whole thing. Maybe also video, probably video also is incorporated now. And There is no date yet of performance, but it will be sometime at the beginning of 2023. And I have another trio for percussions.
Oh, wow.
Percussion trio for line upon line percussion from Texas, from Austin, Texas. And we will also create some sort of a theater,
that's to be expected from you these days, right?
Yes.
It's always going to be a
Yes.
little bit scenic, a little bit theatralic, yeah.
Right. The piece for Sound Initiative is working on imagery, and the idea of imagery with a lot of mylar, and again will be with sound illusion and stuff like that, but it will be from like a perspective of a bug.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so I'm kind of diving into the world of bugs and future bugs, and we will see what happens from that, but yeah.
Wow, very exciting. Can hardly wait. Yeah, fellas, I guess we're signing out. This has been Fold by Fold podcast. I'm Paul Hermansen, and I've been talking to Dr. Sivan Cohen Elias from Jerusalem, now living in Chicago, I think.
Actually, in New York.
In New York. Oh, you've relocated again. Maybe you gotta re-update your website.
Probably I should.
Before it gets hacked and you get the Medusa virus,
Yeah, exactly. And before I relocate again.
Yeah, exactly. It's really been an honor. Yeah, fellas, this is it. Please check out her stuff. All the links are in the descriptions. You've heard it here first.
Thank you very much.
Yeah,
I really enjoyed it.
Okay, bye-bye, everyone.
Bye.